My name is Marie. A few weeks ago, my ex-husband's new wife told my daughter something so cruel, so calculated that it shattered the fragile foundation I'd been building since our divorce. She looked my daughter straight in the eye and said, "Your mom couldn't even keep a family together, but at least now you can see what a real home looks like." My daughter is 10. Emma was just trying to enjoy a birthday party for her stepbrother, sketching the decorations in her little notebook like she always does, when she heard a woman who barely knows her mother attempt to rewrite our entire story with surgical precision. I didn't find out until hours later. When I did, my hands trembled so hard I couldn't hold my coffee cup. I wanted to drive straight to their mansion and confront her, but I didn't. I stayed quiet. I let the anger simmer. I let my daughter decide how she wanted to handle it. At that next party, with a room full of kids and cupcakes and parents who had no idea what was coming, she picked up a fork, tapped a glass and said, "Can I share what my dad messaged my mom last night while lying next to you?" The entire room went dead silent. And just like that, the party crumbled. It's haunting how silence can feel heavier than screaming. After my divorce, that silence wrapped around me like a suffocating blanket. It was there in the mornings when I packed Emma's lunch with shaking hands, in the nights when I stared at the ceiling of our cramped apartment, and in the space between business messages that used to be loving texts, now replaced by cold updates like "pick up at 3, don't be late, I'm 34. I work from home as a graphic designer, which sounds creative and fulfilling until you're scrambling for clients to pay rent. I live in a small 2-bedroom apartment just outside San Antonio with my daughter Emma. She's 10, all artistic soul and fierce observation skills that cut straight through adult lies. She's the kind of girl who draws portraits of people's emotions and always notices when I haven't eaten dinner. She didn't choose to grow up watching me struggle to make ends meet, but she never once made me feel like I was failing her. Her dad, Marcus, and I were married for 12 years. We met in college, fell completely, married young, and tried to build something real together. The early years were beautiful in their messiness. When Emma was born, something shifted. It wasn't sudden, but I felt him withdrawing emotionally while diving deeper into his work. By year 10, we were business partners raising a child together. By year 12, he told me he wasn't in love anymore. 3 months later, he moved out. 16 months after that, he was married again. Her name is Victoria. She's a wellness coach and social media influencer with a smile that never reaches her eyes and a bank account that dwarfs mine. She met Marcus at some expensive business seminar. I saw her Instagram long before meeting her in person. Luxury retreats, mindfulness quotes over sunset photos, perfectly staged meditation sessions. The kind of woman who talks about abundance mindset while charging $300 for online courses. When I finally met her, she was exactly what I expected: professionally warm in public, ice cold in private. She said Marie like she was addressing hired help. Her smile was practiced, calculated. She treated Emma like an inconvenient reminder of Marcus's past rather than his daughter. At first, I tried to stay hopeful. Co-parenting across economic lines is challenging, but I believed if we all put Emma first, we could make it work. I communicated professionally. I never missed a handoff. I encouraged Emma to respect Victoria, even when it stung to watch her walk into a house worth more than I'd make in 5 years. I maintained my boundaries and swallowed my pride repeatedly. But something shifted last fall. Emma started coming home with less light in her eyes. She'd disappear into her room, abandoning her usual ritual of showing me her weekend sketches. One evening, as we organized her art supplies, she said quietly, "Victoria posted about their family day and cropped me out of all the photos." I asked if that hurt her feelings. She shrugged, then whispered, "I felt like I don't belong anywhere." My heart cracked. I wanted to call Marcus immediately, but I knew how easily that would be twisted into bitter ex-wife or boundary violations. So I watched and waited, checking in gently with Emma, listening more than speaking, and reminding her daily that she was cherished, valued, and seen. The moment that shattered everything came on a grey Sunday evening after Marcus dropped Emma off. She climbed into my car, arms crossed tightly, her art bag thrown carelessly at her feet. She didn't speak. I asked about her weekend. Nothing. I waited. It wasn't until we were home and I was helping her hang up her jacket that she whispered, "Victoria told me you couldn't keep a family together. But at least now I can see what a real home looks like." My blood turned to ice. For several seconds I couldn't breathe. My chest constricted. I looked into her eyes and managed, "What exactly did she say?" Emma repeated it word for word, then added, "She said I was lucky Marcus still lets you be part of my life." That night, I lay awake burning with rage. My chest felt like it was filled with broken glass. I replayed every sacrifice, every compromise, every therapy session, every midnight panic attack, and every forced smile to keep Emma's world stable. All of it dismissed by a woman who waltzed in during the final act and decided she had the authority to rewrite the entire play. I didn't message Victoria. I didn't text Marcus. I held Emma closer than ever before. I told her none of Victoria's words were true. I reminded her that love isn't measured by the size of your house. It's measured by who shows up when life gets messy. I had no idea what Emma was planning, but my daughter was about to teach all of us about courage. After Emma told me what Victoria had said, I fought to stay composed for her sake more than mine. I didn't want my daughter to see me completely fall apart. Even though inside I was shaking with fury, I walked to our tiny kitchen and started dinner like it was any normal evening. I stirred pasta sauce and diced onions while my mind raced, debating whether to confront Marcus or let it go. But this wasn't some careless comment. Victoria had looked my daughter in the eye and tried to make her feel ashamed of her own mother, ashamed of our modest life. That's not co-parenting, that's psychological warfare wrapped in designer athleisure and false spirituality. I tucked Emma in that night and asked, "How did those words make you feel?" She hesitated, then said, "Like I was supposed to pick a side." I kissed her forehead and told her, "You never have to choose. Your heart is big enough to love everyone, but no one has the right to make you feel ashamed of who you are or where you come from." The next morning, Emma was unusually quiet. She stared at her cereal, then asked, "Why does she hate us so much?" I struggled for an answer. I said, "Sometimes people feel threatened when they can't control the narrative. But the truth doesn't change just because someone else tries to rewrite it." I hoped maybe things would settle down. Maybe Victoria had just had a bad day. Or maybe she didn't think Emma would repeat her words. But 2 days later it happened again. Emma came home early from her visit, barely making it through half the weekend. She walked in, dropped her bag, and went straight to her room. When I followed her, she was curled up on her bed with her sketchbook pressed against her chest. I sat beside her. She wouldn't look at me. She said, "Victoria told me you should be grateful that Marcus still allows you to be involved." My stomach plummeted. That word allows, like I needed permission to love my own child. Like I was a footnote in a story I had written with blood, tears, and every ounce of strength I possessed after our divorce. I texted Marcus brief and direct, "We need to talk." He replied, swamped with work. "Can it wait?" I didn't respond. I knew that door would stay locked unless he chose to open it, and I refused to beg. Later that week, just past midnight, I received a message from him out of nowhere. I was in bed, nearly asleep, when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. He had written, "I miss how we used to laugh together. You were always authentic with me. Victoria is just performance and barriers." I stared at the screen for what felt like hours. I didn't reply. I took a screenshot and saved it. I didn't need his words, but I needed the evidence. The next morning, Emma saw the message. I hadn't realized I'd left my phone unlocked. She walked into the kitchen holding it and asked, "Did he really mean it?" I looked into her eyes and said, "It doesn't matter what he meant. What matters is that we don't let people lie to us about who we are." She nodded, but I could see her mind working. Her expression changed, her jaw set slightly the way it did when she was preparing to tackle a difficult art project. She didn't say much that day, but she began watching me more intently, noticing details: how I double-checked her homework, how I packed extra snacks in her lunch, how I hugged her longer when she seemed tired. The following weekend was Victoria's son Ethan's birthday party. He was turning 8. They invited Emma, and surprisingly, she wanted to attend. She stated it like a fact, not a request. "I'm going," she told me. "I need to see something." I studied her face carefully. She wasn't angry. She was determined. She had made a decision. I asked, "Are you absolutely sure?" She nodded firmly. "Yes." I dropped her off at their house on Saturday afternoon. As she walked up the perfectly manicured driveway, surrounded by elaborate decorations and the buzz of expensive camera equipment, she didn't look back once. She walked through that front door like she owned the place, but she carried something with her that they weren't expecting. She had heard every lie they'd told, and she was done staying silent. Saturday morning felt charged with electricity. Emma was already awake when I came downstairs. She had dressed herself carefully, braided her hair, and was zipping up her favorite hoodie with an unusual stillness in her eyes. She ate her breakfast in complete silence. No humming, no silly stories, none of the cheerful chatter that usually filled our small space. Just focused determination. I was the one with butterflies in my stomach. Every instinct screamed at me to tell her she didn't have to go. I wanted to say, let's forget it. We'll have our own adventure today. Just us. But I recognized something profound happening inside her. This wasn't a child being dragged into adult drama. This was a young person walking into it with her head held high. Are you absolutely certain you want to go? I asked, watching her lace up her sneakers with methodical precision. She looked up at me and nodded. I have to. I didn't push. I didn't try to shield her with warnings or advice. She already understood what this was. It wasn't about revenge or creating drama. It was about being heard, and she had spent enough time being silenced. The party was at Marcus and Victoria's house, a sprawling estate in an exclusive neighborhood, everything meticulously perfect. They had spared no expense for Ethan's 8th birthday. There were professional party planners, a massive bouncy castle, balloon installations that belonged in magazines, and even a gourmet ice cream cart. Music pumped from hidden speakers. People I didn't recognize were already posing for social media content. I pulled up to the circular driveway and Emma opened the car door with purpose. Want me to walk you in? I offered. No, I'll message you when I'm ready. She closed the door gently and walked up the stone pathway with her gift tucked under one arm. I watched her until she disappeared through the massive front door, swallowed by the crowd of perfectly dressed families. Back home, I couldn't concentrate on anything. I tried working on a design project, then cleaning, then mindlessly scrolling social media, but my thoughts kept returning to that morning, to her face, to the resolve in her voice. 2 hours crawled by, then 3. I kept checking my phone, waiting for her text that she was ready to leave. Then, just after 3 p.m., my phone lit up, not with a message from her, but from another parent, hey, checking in. Everything all right? We had to leave the party early. There was quite a situation. My heart sank into my stomach. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Emma. Can you pick me up now? I drove faster than I should have, my hands gripping the steering wheel. When I arrived, she was already outside, sitting calmly on the front steps with her jacket on and a small party favor bag beside her. Her eyes were clear. Her posture was relaxed. She looked like someone who had completed an important mission. She climbed into the car and buckled her seatbelt. I looked at her, waiting for her to speak. She sat quietly for several moments. Then she said simply, I told them the truth. I didn't ask for details yet. I knew she would share when she was ready. But something fundamental had shifted. The remarkable thing was she didn't seem shaken or upset. She looked liberated. That evening, as she helped me prepare dinner, she finally explained. They were doing this activity where all the kids had to share something nice about Ethan in front of everyone. Like a memory or compliment, she said. I nodded encouragingly. After it got quiet, I stood up and said, I want to share something too. She paused. I said, can I tell you all what my dad messaged my mom last night while he was lying next to Victoria? I froze completely. She continued. Nobody made a sound. It was like time stopped. She told me that Marcus tried to interrupt her, but she kept going. She recited the message he had sent me, word for word, to the entire room. I miss how we used to laugh together. You were always authentic. Victoria is just performance and barriers. My mouth went completely dry. You actually did that? I asked. She nodded. I wanted them to see what kind of man he really is and what kind of woman she is for trying to destroy you. I was speechless. I just stared at her, my daughter. 10 years old, braver than most adults I've ever known. That moment, her choice to speak, her refusal to remain silent, changed everything. It wasn't just about defending me. It was about her voice, her truth, and the integrity she chose to protect. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She didn't need to. She simply spoke the truth. The party was in full swing when Emma arrived. The music was overwhelming. The decorations were Instagram-worthy. Victoria was commanding the scene. She wore a flowing white dress, gliding from one group of wealthy parents to another like she was hosting a charity gala. A professional photographer moved through the crowd, capturing content for what would become Victoria's next social media showcase. To everyone else, it appeared to be just an elaborate children's party. But to Emma, it was something entirely different. It was her stage, Emma greeted a few familiar faces, handed Ethan his carefully wrapped gift, and positioned herself at a table near the back. She observed everything. She didn't engage much. She didn't smile. She waited patiently. About an hour into the celebration, Victoria called everyone's attention to the main patio, where several children were invited to share kind words about Ethan. "Let's take a moment for everyone to say something wonderful about our birthday boy," she announced with her practiced smile. Parents applauded. Phones came out to record. A few children stepped forward and offered comments like, "He's really good at video games," or "He always shares his candy." Then the crowd began to quiet. People were starting to drift back toward the elaborate food stations when Emma stood up, walked calmly to the nearest table, picked up a fork and gently tapped it against a crystal glass. The clear chime cut through the ambient noise louder than expected. Everyone turned toward her. She stepped onto a chair, cleared her throat, and said in a steady, carrying voice, "Can I share something too?" There was a brief silence, and Victoria's smile tightened, her hand already extending as if to gently guide Emma down. But Emma didn't move. She said, "I just want to tell you all what my dad messaged my mom last night while lying in bed next to Victoria." The words hit the gathering like a physical blow. The party stopped completely. No music, no conversation, even the ice cream cart stopped churning. Every eye was fixed on her. Emma reached into her hoodie pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper with the printed screenshot. She unfolded it carefully with both hands and read aloud. Not shouting, but clearly enough for the entire space to hear, "I miss how we used to laugh together. You were always authentic. Victoria is just performance and barriers." Gasps rippled through the crowd. One mother's wine glass slipped from her hand and shattered. Several children looked around in confusion, but every adult understood exactly what they had just witnessed. Victoria froze completely, her hand still suspended awkwardly in the air. Her practiced smile vanished. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words emerged. Marcus, who had been networking with other fathers near the outdoor kitchen, turned slowly and stared at Emma with complete shock. He looked like someone had just pulled the ground out from beneath him. Before anyone could respond, Emma turned directly to Marcus and added, "Don't message Mom like that if you're going to let your wife lie about her to me." Complete silence. Then someone whispered, "Did she really just say that?" Another voice asked, "Is this actually happening?" Just like that, the entire atmosphere cracked. Victoria's carefully constructed world began to crumble. Marcus opened his mouth as if to speak, but nothing came out. He just stood there blinking, trapped between damage control and total humiliation. Victoria finally found her voice, but it trembled. "This is completely inappropriate. This is a child's birthday party." Emma didn't even flinch. So is telling a child that her mom failed at keeping a family together. Several parents began stepping away. Someone took their child by the hand and headed for the exit. The photographer quietly packed up his equipment and left without a word. One of the mothers muttered something about not wanting to be involved in this drama and followed suit. The party collapsed within minutes. No more music, no more cake cutting, no more photo opportunities. Victoria walked into the house without saying anything else. Marcus followed her, then turned back briefly, locking eyes with Emma. She held his gaze steadily and calmly. He looked away first. Emma walked back to the front of the property, sent me a text, and waited on the steps as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But everything had. By the time I arrived, guests were streaming out. Some looked confused, others simply uncomfortable. But Emma looked serene. She had used her voice not to embarrass anyone, but to defend the truth. She hadn't lashed out emotionally. She had spoken clearly, simply, and honestly. In doing so, she had shattered a lie that had been poisoning both our lives for months. That was the moment everything transformed, not just for Victoria, not just for Marcus, but for me. Because my daughter didn't just defend me. She liberated both of us. When we arrived home from the party, Emma kicked off her shoes like it was any ordinary Saturday. She hung her hoodie on its hook, washed her hands methodically, and wandered into the kitchen to get some juice. Not a single trace of guilt or regret crossed her face. She was calm, centered, completely at peace with what she had done. I stood there watching her, still processing. Not what she had said, but the quiet confidence with which she had said it. There was no malice in her delivery. She hadn't tried to humiliate anyone or create a spectacle. She had simply spoken truth in the one place where it was being systematically distorted. Later that evening, after dinner, we sat together on our small balcony. The sky was painted in soft pastels, the kind you only see in early spring. Emma leaned her head against my shoulder, and for several minutes we just listened to the evening sounds. Then she asked quietly, "Did I make everything worse?" I turned to her and shook my head. "No, sweetheart. You made it real. You spoke truth when no one else would." She looked relieved, but I could see something still weighing on her. I asked, "Why then? Why at the party?" She answered without hesitation, "Because she said those things to hurt you. And nobody stood up for you, not even Dad." I waited for someone to speak up, and when no one did, I did it myself. I reached over and took her hand in mine. "You shouldn't have had to do that." "I know," she said, "but I'm glad I did." That's what affected me most deeply. She hadn't done it for revenge. She hadn't done it for attention or to cause drama. She had done it because she understood that silence would be more damaging than speaking up. She saw a lie being told and refused to let it continue living. In the days following the party, there were consequences. Victoria blocked me on every social media platform. She deleted multiple curated posts from that day. She made a vague Instagram story about protecting your energy and removing negativity, but the engagement was noticeably lower. People weren't buying her narrative anymore. Marcus didn't contact me immediately, but eventually sent a message. I didn't know she was going to say that. "I never intended for this to happen." I replied only once, "She's your daughter." She didn't break anything. She just stopped pretending. He never responded again. Word spread quickly. Several mothers reached out to say they were proud of Emma. One even told me, "I wish I had possessed that kind of courage when I was her age." So did I. I had spent too much time trying to maintain peace, to stay polite, to avoid being labeled the bitter ex-wife. In that space, I had allowed too many people to trample over the truth. Emma reminded me that silence doesn't always protect you. Sometimes it just convinces people they can say whatever they want without consequences. In the weeks that followed, our small apartment felt lighter somehow. Emma started talking more, laughing more, returning to her art with renewed passion. The distance that had been growing between us began to close. I think she finally believed that I wasn't ashamed of our story, that I wasn't hiding from it. I had simply been waiting for the right moment to stop merely surviving and start truly living. Sometimes I look back on that day and wonder what would have happened if she had remained silent, if she had swallowed the insult the way I had done so many times before. Would Victoria still be planting poison in her mind? Would Marcus still be sending late-night messages, treating me like a guilty secret? Would Emma still be walking through her days wondering which version of reality to believe? I'm grateful I never had to discover those answers. I didn't raise a perfect child. I raised a courageous one, the kind who understands that love and honesty belong together. The kind who knows that a mother's worth isn't defined by someone else's version of events. The next time someone tries to shame her for where she comes from, I know exactly what she'll do. She'll look them directly in the eye. She'll speak with clarity and she won't back down. Because when truth finally finds its voice, it doesn't whisper. It rings like a fork against crystal at a party no one will ever forget. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to rebuild yourself while someone else tried to tear you down, you're not alone. If you're a parent doing your best amid chaos, I hope this reminded you that your strength speaks louder than any lie ever could.